Building a great B2B go-to-market engine starts with understanding what works and evolving it. I'm your host, Rob Carroll, and this is a go-to-market perspective, where marketing and sales leaders share how they're transforming their organizations, foundational best practices, smart trade-offs, and practical AI delivering value and scale today. The pressure to operationalize AI in marketing is immense, and it's coming from every direction. Boards want efficiency, leadership teams need to please their boards, teams are experimenting on their own, IT's trying to govern functional processes they don't really understand. Meanwhile, most marketing leaders are trying to figure out what a real AI transformation looks like versus what it's supposed to look like on a slide deck. Today, I'm sitting down with John Schneider, VP of Platform and Ecosystem Marketing at UKG, to dig into the gap between the two. John brings a practitioner's perspective to what it takes to move from shadow AI and tool sprawl to empowered AI-forward marketing org. John, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, I'm glad you can be here. And why don't we start off, maybe share a little bit about your background, what led you to your current role, and then maybe just describe what you're doing with UKG today.
Absolutely. So my career is 25 years long and running, always been in tech, starting out at Deloitte Consulting and gone on from there. Generally speaking, and I didn't really plan it out, but I've been really centered on solving one problem for the majority of my career, which is traditionally it's transforming a fragmented product portfolio into a more unified and scaled platform for a more repeatable revenue model. So, my role has evolved, largely came out of product marketing, actually first out of IT, ironically, but then went into marketing and started up and through product marketing. And so I've really skewed my skills and strengths and experiences towards go-to-market architecture design, helping scale stage companies really orchestrate their plans and hit their growth objectives for a liquidity event, like driving Intapp to its $2.6 billion IPO back in 2021. So that's like my core, specialization, if you will. Currently at UKG as VP of Platform and Ecosystem Marketing, my mandate is to serve as that architect for the messaging and marketing strategy related to our broad portfolio offering under a single workforce operating platform narrative. UKG, just so you know, is a $5 billion plus revenue global company. If you haven't heard of it, it's pretty darn big. You'll see the brand all over the place now that I've said it. And we're really actively building this real-time system of action that integrates the largest workforce data set in the world. My focus is really bringing, when it comes to the AI side of this topic that we're going to be discussing, is really bringing that AI native approach to our go-to-market execution so that we can help drive a better acceleration of adoption of the broader platform and portfolio that we're trying to bring to the market. We have 80,000 customers globally, so the opportunity is immense, and it's just a very exciting thing. Prior to UKG, I was Chief Marketing Officer at BetterWorks for the past 4 years, where I had a very similar theme, where it was a multi-year journey to commercial transformation, taking a single product tool into a more integrated performance enablement platform. So that's really kind of my thing. And I've become, over the last few, maybe the last decade or so, very passionate about workforce transformation in general. So typically what I look for in opportunities for me is not just that transformation around moving to platform and scaling the business, but also I look for solutions and problems related to how I can help make the workforce more effective in their jobs. And of course, that means I'm also looking at AI from the lens of the actual products we're selling.
You're in a kind of fun convergence because, being all your experience in HR tech, which is all about organization, performance, management, engagement, and you're doing that in terms of all the culture shifts to go from a multi-product to a platform. I think that takes a lot of history. This is very similar to my background too, where you're like, you have the folks that are really passionate about their product and no one wants to be that, stepchild that doesn't get the same amount of attention, but that's not how you run a portfolio or a platform. So you're dealing with the change management of the org, plus selling an actual product to solve change management within orgs, plus obviously what we're going to talk about today is how AI is fitting into all of this. How can you operationalize a lot of this change management, a lot of these processes to scale as you get bigger? dealing with reality versus hype, which is the title of our episode. And, let's just say I don't think our episode is going to be incredibly unique because I think there's a lot of people questioning the hype and trying to understand what's real. And so I'm excited about our discussion today to kind of, at least get your perception of kind of where things are going and how you're actually applying this at UKJ. So let's start with kind of what's happening frontline on the ground. So the public narrative around AI and marketing is pretty chaotic. There's lots of vendors out there and marketing leaders out there publicly on LinkedIn claiming all of their brilliant innovations and all the cool things that they've done or that you can do with their product. But when you actually get into the front line, the actual frontline marketing teams and different disciplines within marketing, there's a lot of churn, a lot of experimentation, but the repeatable ROI seems to be a little hard to nail down. So, from your perspective, what is the reality in the front line versus the hype that we're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is really that marketing is absolutely drowning in noise right now, right? I mean, there's hype about the hype as you just come. There's probably too many conversations about all the hype. But I mean, the boardroom pressure is palpable to change, to evolve quickly. And, candidly, nobody's been through this kind of a change before. So even the C-suite doesn't necessarily know what's next step, right? So that pressure to do something, to act is incredibly intense. And then when there's any sort of shortcomings or mishaps, then AI, you talked about the sprawl of AI, right? Then people take it into their own hands, right? And that idea of governance between what is central and corporate and offered and trained against and protected data versus how you allow your frontline worker to actually use AI and experiment is really a candidly somewhat a mystery for all of us to get that balance right, and it'll probably take several more years to work that out. So I do see that generally there's been this rush to throw tools out. I think that has slowed down a little bit with the realization of how much AI costs. And we've seen that now, which is almost now it's retracting the other way too much, where it's like, oh, wait, now you got to justify the use of AI. So we're still in very, very early stages of this. But I think, the way that I look at this is, the tech should scale your vision and not your legacy of how you've worked in the past, right? Mm-hmm. If you take a fundamentally broken process, a siloed marketing activity, and you inject it with generative AI, you don't transform the business, you just accelerate the chaos, the dysfunction. And really what you're doing is adding speed and volume to problems you already had.
I'm going to get to that problem quicker.
Yeah. You're going to get to that problem quicker. And it's getting to the point where it's so quick, you could be creating situations where you're breaking customer trust, which is the ultimate wrongdoing in marketing, in my opinion. I think to rewire marketing, you really have to intentionally look at the architects of that effort. And if they're the architects of the current process and the current infrastructure, if you just give them the pen and say, you write the plan and you run with the technology, people are going to unconsciously be biased towards protecting legacy ways of doing work, protecting organizational norms and things like that. They don't mean to, but it's natural. And so I think the first real principle you have to take a step back in this world and where we stand right now is you need to go back to the basics of understanding that a true AI first operational model is going to require that clean sheet, not somebody just running in and writing down a plan. And I think that's where you mentioned the practitioner side. Being a practitioner of the area that's being optimized is absolutely critical because you have to have a willingness to completely redesign your process. But you need to understand the business problem you're solving and what good looks like, right? Before you were to deploy any technology solutions against it. I think for me, I think about that and why maybe I've been more successful than average on this front is that having started my entire career at Deloitte Consulting and then at several marketing agencies after that, I was always starting with a fresh pen, right? I had new clients all the time. And so, you always started with anchoring on a business problem, not on the technology or the solution that would follow. So it was always about what jobs need to be done. How do they need to be done? What's the aspirational vision of the buyer's journey? What are we trying to achieve outside in the market? And all those things that really anchor you on a future that's actually going to be optimal, not just speeding up with technology, essentially, right? So I think that's really an important aspect of avoiding getting into that chaos of hype cycle of just keep throwing tools out, trying things and trying to prove, oh yeah, how many hours I use AI. It seems to be we judge things on how many hours you use AI, not what outcome you get from it, right? And that just shows how early stage we are right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And interestingly, the cool thing about the AI early adoption within enterprise was this incredible desire for frontline employees to play with it and to experiment and to learn. But at the same time, I think you're right. Many of them, especially maybe less experienced, more junior employees, they're just automating what they're already doing. Whereas I'm guessing you'll probably agree, real leadership and strategy is not assuming what worked yesterday is going to get us to where we need to be tomorrow. So the rethinking of the processes as you're rebuilding and maybe automating some of them is that level of judgment, which leadership right now, and I think we're going to get to this, is you hinted leaders don't even know what to ask for.
Mhm.
So they're just asking for a lot of experimentation and innovation without setting a real goal. So I love that you're trying to put some real practical thought into what is our goal? What are we trying
Yeah. Yeah.
to accomplish? What does good look like? And then we can build something.
Yeah, I mean, there's no owner's guide handed to you on AI right now, right? And there's no warranty against it. And so I think what you're talking about there, if you take the road of I need to scramble to keep up to prove to others that we're doing something, you're probably already just starting it from the wrong place. And that usually is the side of just basic efficiency metrics that I think pretty much anybody could attain with by just handing people tools anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that creates like this unnatural environment for succeeding. And I think I'm calling it like hype cycle amnesia. We've all, if we've done this a few times around, we've been through multiple hype cycles in our careers in different technologies. This may be the most intensive. However, we all know what to do things right. We've all been through digital transformations multiple times now, different forms of it. And if you take steps back and ask yourself, what is the normal way to approach a business problem? Really, it's not that hard to do this or hard to succeed with it. But it's this notion of rushing so fast against something so immensely powerful that I think is really creating a vice between what leadership expects and what employees are actually getting out of it.
Yeah, and let's start on the positive of AI. We'll talk about the challenges as well, but a positive is some of the grassroots frontline work that's being done. They're coming up with some really great things that could help the marketing org or product org or sales or anywhere, could help create more efficiencies, open bandwidth to do more strategic work. But because it's really a lot of this is shadow AI, it's this shadow AI sprawl it exists on people's desktops or in their accounts. But how do you go from this grassroots experiment to actually saying, okay, this is what we want to adopt as a marketing leader? Everyone in this function that does this process should follow this same path using these same tools and training similar skills or however, whatever AI tools you're using. How do you get from individual play to operationalizing and scaling something that's working?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that on a couple of different levels. I mean, first on that point about kind of that grassroots development of it and use. One thing that I think has been very left out of the conversation is middle management. There's been a lot written about, getting rid of middle management, that everybody's a manager. But there's something to be said for what middle managers are, which is they are accomplished individuals in their craft, right? They're practitioners of excellence in their area, and therefore they've earned the right to manage other people. And of those people are the ones that are trying to aspire to be like them. They're learning their craft, right? So if AI is less of a technology problem, more of a people and change management problem, which is what I believe, then middle management has a critical lean-in relationship to this, right? Middle management, they're the ones on the ground every day trying to make an operation or a thread work and run through. And then I'll take it to the next level, which is what is the ultimate, or at least what we perceive to be sort of more the ultimate version of all this, what we're doing with agentic is we're going to be orchestrating workflows across teams, across people, across roles. Well, who's going to solve that? The individual practitioner certainly is not. They know their job and they're working on their job. It's the middle management layer, not leadership, that is really going to understand. I mean, you know marketing, right? We've both been in marketing a long time. Think of how many handoffs there are, right? Who is the person who's actually going to understand what an agentic orchestration layer looks like that takes things from, a business problem to a creative brief to a concept to the written copy, the advertising, the creative, the now into demand gen and downstream further. Like, there is only one way to approach that, which is having experts who actually understand what good looks like across that. Where are bottlenecks? Where are there opportunities for efficiency? Where does human need to stay in the loop? Where can they step back? And I think we're really missing that point right now. It feels like it's more of a leadership mandate with not enough clarity that goes skip down to everybody with equal attention to what they need to do. Not that managers are a special class of individual that is the empowerment layer for the rest of the workforce. And that's, I think, something I really think is a really big miss in the model for a lot of companies right now.
No, I think it's a great point regarding middle management. And I think we have a personal bias around product marketing. Like, a sales or engineering middle manager manage up and down. Mm-hmm. They're managing the engineers or the sales reps in their region, or they're managing up to their VP or their directors or their product. When you're a product marketer, you're managing sideways too. Mm-hmm. And because it's cross-functionally, you're working across product and sales and support and whomever. So it's even more important to get your processes worked out and understood, with getting support from leadership and getting buy-in from so many people. So just, the bias is showing in terms of the fun of a product marketing job description, but the challenge is even greater as well. I'd love to kind of, on the other side, when you hinted at this, kind of around those top-down mandates. So we're hearing from investors, boards of directors, CEOs saying, we got to embed AI everywhere. We want to save some money. We want to make it clear to our investors that, we are being the most efficient business possible. So it's all about cost savings, to your point. And that's not the ultimate value. We'll probably dig more into this later, but just right now, as a leader or a middle manager, how do you balance these top-down mandates to just, without any guidance, but embed AI everywhere, with operational discipline and realities that you're accountable for certain OKRs, if you will, or KPIs for the org to deliver some sort of value? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, and I think to that point, there are some aspects of that are uncontrollables, if you're at the management layer and you're trying to just do right by the goals of the company. However, what I think is going to happen is there's been a tremendous push, particularly in the tech industry, for margin and efficiency. And I think it actually even predated AI to some degree. I think there may have been over exuberance and investment and growth. And so there was a natural desire to get to more profitability within these SaaS companies to sort of pay off against whatever projected valuations they were expected to have at IPO and such. So I think there was some that was just part of this was natural, and AI just put more sort of enabled a rapid move towards, how do we increase our margins? But cutting headcount is often a very short-sighted view of what you need to do in the immediate to correct course, right? And it can be a margin eroding, company culture to build against, right? So I think the thing that I really, what we need to focus around on is, what is the true ROI of AI? And that's hard to say, true ROI of AI, but it's really about buying back execution capacity. So if you've done the headcount cuts and you've also asked them to use AI, really this is where the rub is right now. You're actually overworking the people that remain, and you've kept your top talent, the ones that could actually invent and be creative and find new pockets of innovation for the business, and ask them to do everybody else's job too, because the AI was supposed to be able to cover for it. So it's a short-sighted view, but I do think what we'll see, often what we see with these sorts of hype cycles and changes in the market, it's going to rebound back where people start to ask, well, we need more people back in the model to support what's going to happen. So I think there's this moment where you just sort of have to brace yourself a little bit. But with that said, your question is more about what do you do about it with your hands in the cookie jar and running as fast as you can. How do you have an impact? And I think really you have to be one of those types of people that embraces technology. You don't have fear of use of it, and you are at a moment of growth in your own career. Nobody, again, really knows the end game of how effective AI will be. So I think if I were talking to a mid-level manager in this situation, you might be wanting to put the framework of like, what was it like right when I got out of college and I was proving myself and I was working an extra 10 hours a week. You're going to have to be somebody who's growth oriented. You're going to have to be somebody experiential with like what you're doing and experiment a lot. And you're going to have to be a coach to the people below you. When ChatGPT really kind of hit full force, I was CMO at what is a relatively small startup. And so we didn't have all the IT infrastructure and coaching, and we didn't have, OpenAI or Google experts coming in and training us over and over again on best practices. We weren't doing that. I was the one who had to open it up and, create my first custom GPT. And I built my own, baseline curriculum for my content team. And I said, we're going to go through this and we're going to try to build an agent together. Right. And I had it all pre-canned because I built it myself. That's a lot, when you're a CMO, that's like taking yourself back to, a lot of basics in terms of, learning how to use a tool and bringing it through. But I think that, that models the way for others, right? If you show, as a leader, you show the expectation, then others will follow.
I was recently talking to somebody about managing up to their CEO. And right now, to your point, a lot of the more senior leaders are not getting their hands dirty. They're mandating, but like the extent of this CEO using AI is to get what their high-paid, experienced employees are recommending and putting it with AI and asking if AI agrees. Right? And then if it doesn't agree, what do you do with that when the CEO doesn't even know how to necessarily, these are not all CEOs, I'm saying this example, but there's a lot of that out there where I think everyone needs to get more confident at every level of the organization for everyone's career growth and security. I don't think CEOs that don't know how to use AI and being able to leverage AI skills, that's not going to scale 5 years from now either.
Yeah, I to your point, I think with leadership, one of the things that maybe is typically a leadership skill, but not something necessarily emphasized at the individual contributor level is human judgment. When it comes down to AI, human judgment is the gold standard of skills that you can apply to what you're looking at. So if you think back to the rollouts of say Microsoft Office when it became an online tool and it was a suite and all that. I mean, if you looked at, like, for example, Excel, finance puts in extremely sophisticated long string formulas. Well, it's no different. They had to like double, triple, quadruple check whether their formula was correct. I mean, especially if they're working on things that are going to go to the board, right? That's human judgment being applied. And I think I think with the natural language component of AI, some people just look at it and it just looks too right to even question it. And that's absolutely the wrong route to go because it actually has more risk of being wrong than that formula that finance person was putting in Excel. So I think human judgment, and I've even written about it in Forbes. I wrote an article about the value of liberal studies coming back. The idea that you can critically think is going to be one of the most important human components in the future because you are now, most importantly, like in marketing, we've all been often slotted. I said I came up through product marketing. Everybody comes up through some route: field marketing, product marketing, some other aspect of marketing. Well, I don't think it's going to be that narrow anymore because what's going to happen is with all of that agentic orchestration, you're gonna be able to take on a broader domain and do more of the workflow than you've ever done before. And I think that's okay. Actually, that's empowering and interesting to me. But that means it's about you judging the quality of how the orchestration goes rather than you doing all the work yourself individually. You might not be the best writer. So how do you figure that part out if now it's doing writing for you and you didn't necessarily have to work with somebody on that piece of the advertising copy or whatever?
I think the most important human skill is problem solving. And
Yep.
no matter what marketing or any other role you're in, if all you're doing is following some scripted process, you're not problem solving. You can become a better writer if you have basic skills in how to solve a problem because you'll know the steps to learn and how to build judgment and experience. So, yeah, couldn't agree more. There's a lot of folks at different levels that are at different stages. In tech, sure, we're probably more ahead in terms of adoption and expectation, especially. There's other industries that are, either more conservative, more highly regulated, or just laggards based on the type of business they're in that don't have the same pressure. They're still playing with AI, but don't have the same pressures. But you've been through a number of, put AI aside, a number of just massive business transformations. You mentioned the IPO that you helped support. You talking about it going from multi-product to platform repositioning and go-to-market strategies. So with AI now, so what are some of the biggest risks that you feel a lot of leaders may underestimate as they're promoting AI operationalization of marketing and all these other processes? Like, what's the thing that has not been considered? You mentioned middle management's important. I think that was a good one. But are there any other things that you think leadership just needs to focus on more than they may not have with all the hype?
Yeah, I think, back to the hype cycle part of it, there is the side of this, which is almost like, depending on the industry, like you said, some industries are moving so fast. It's not really applied AI. It's, throw the tools out to try to gain the efficiencies, potentially lower headcount, things of that nature. I do see companies almost running so fast and so furious at this that they're losing focus on their core customer base and the fact that the customer is not moving nearly as fast as they are. It's AI this, AI that, AI this, AI that, and instead of just understanding that your customer 3 months ago is the customer they were 1 year ago, and they're the customer you're standing in front of today with minor, growth and change in terms of what their expectations are. If you lose that customer centricity on your go-to-market strategy and understanding what keeps you competitive in your market, and you just start to catch up, you're trying to race towards all the AI tools you would offer your customer, you may start to lose sight of the fact that you had competitive differentiators that are equally valuable as they were before. In a parallel contrast, not with AI, but when I was at Jive Software, I headed up a very large pricing and packaging study where we did a global multivariate study of thousands of people on what is the willingness to pay for our product. Mm-hmm. And it was a very interesting, multi-month process. But when the results came back, and I think the product organization in particular was stunned, the things that scored the highest for value were the exact reasons why people bought our product when it was first conceived of. And so I've created this analogy with Facebook. I'm like, one of the things Facebook knows not to do is to mess up the news stream, right? The social stream, right? Because that is the core reason Facebook exists, regardless of whether they throw a marketplace on top or some other feature set. They've never done anything to ditch the basic nature of looking in that stream as your reason for opening the app. And I think a lot of the time we get so caught up in the fact that if growth isn't where it's at, or competitors are saying something flashy, or the analysts inform you of something, suddenly that has to be everything you're putting your energy against. When the fundamental willingness to buy on the product is based on what was this product doing and what was it supposed to be doing from the day the business started to take off and have value, right? So I think that's one of the most important things right now in this time is to sort of keep your cool a little bit, be confident, have some swagger, understand your customer is not moving as fast as you think they are.
Right. Yeah, but at the same time, I definitely see certainly more mature organizations where the thing that they were best known for has become commoditized. Mm-hmm. I think back to many years ago, I worked at Intuit. Intuit was founded with Quicken, personal finance, mm-hmm. as is grown into this, multi-billion dollar, massive, successful tech company. It spun off Quicken a couple of years ago. Right. So there are stages. So I agree with you in essence, but there are stages in a company's life cycle where the thing they're best known for, they may need to reinvent themselves, or their growth is going to be flat, and their TAM is shrinking. So that's when it gets really hard. That's the real transformation, when you're like, our past can't be our future anymore because there's no more market for it, because there's disruptions and there's other things. And I don't think apps are dead, but apps are certainly challenged. That's the other side of that coin.
It's a tension, and it's constant, right? There's new product introduction and innovation, and then there's continuous innovation against the thing that you are known for and capable of doing. Mm-hmm. Those moments of true inflection where you face the threat of commoditization have to be highly considered. And I think, going back to what I said before, I don't disagree with you, by the way. Going back to what I said before, though, if you think about it from the standpoint that we've all been through these transformations before, there are ways to do this, ways to approach it. And it's not necessarily to scramble and run as fast as you can at the shiniest object next to you. It goes back to the classic model of understanding your buyer and looking for the trends and patterns in which that they are actually doing things and going after those things. So it just becomes, and when we're in these hype cycles where there's just so much news and media around just doing something different, it can be easy just to say, I want to do something different versus do what is right in what you do in a digital transformation, where you study the market, you understand the situation, you quantify the value, and then you test and learn and grow from there. Today, we often just declare our next direction before we've even had enough time to know how much customer uptake we'll even get from it.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, because even my Intuit example, it wasn't an overnight decision and a light switch to spin off Quicken. It was probably a 10-year journey that led to that. So Don't move so fast, because your customers are not, to your point, moving as fast as you're fearing. But that's what happened with AI. Agentic was like the new word that everyone's liked. And I went to the Gartner event, and every single booth was agentic something. And it didn't even mean anything. Mm-hmm. No one used the term appropriately in terms of what it's actually, the actual promise of it. It was just an adjective to describe whatever the heck they were selling, because they were afraid not to, but all they've done is confuse everybody. And so that's the example of the gut fear, make a quick change without actually considering what it even means.
At one of the HR Tech conferences I went to, I took pictures of the different promise statements that were made on booths last year, and I didn't show what the company's name was. And I sent it to my team, and these were big vendors, like everybody knows who they are. Mm-hmm. And I would ask, who is this? And nobody can answer any of them. Because it's all just AI does this AI thing for AI. And I to your point, I think people didn't even know what they were saying at that stage. They were just trying to say, we do AI. So yeah, it's just a risky, and like I said, and I do get it. I mean, there's absolutely the need to move quickly and experiment and all of those things. But this has just been a particularly, I think, aggressive transformation of how business is to be done in the future. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much learning to be done in this process that we have to remind ourselves that our customer base wants the greatest and to know you're an innovator, but they also don't want you to be risky. They don't want you to be disingenuous to what they've been in the past. There's all those basic truths that you give your customer that make them believe in you and go with you through the process. Most customers don't wake up every day like saying they want to change their technology stack out. That's a pain. Yeah. It's not a desire. So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
It's true, and obviously, as an experienced marketer, as well as anybody that the best marketers think about what their customers need before they think of anything else. And that usually is a pretty safe way to go to market, because you're going to remain relevant no matter what hype's around you. And a lot of earlier stage companies, more junior marketers, may be afraid of not pitching the newest feature or proving that our innovation is as good as anyone's. But I always say, first, best, and only are the worst differentiators. So it's like that means nothing to a customer. Let's talk, as we're kind of wrapping up, to the workforce itself. So there's the concept of the synthetic workforce, which is a scary as hell concept to folks that are already losing their jobs and trying to get new jobs. And the idea that what does it mean getting humans out of the loop for a lot of these processes? Is there a positive spin in bad marketing? But is there a positive spin around the fact that if we get AI to take on certain roles and to be, let's call it a trusted embedded part of the workforce. We're not at the trusted stage yet, but let's say we get to a point because AI is improving, people are learning. Let's assume we get to a point where AI is a trusted embedded part of the workforce. What does it mean with synthetic workforce working with humans? How is this a positive for marketers everywhere?
I absolutely think we just need to confront these things with the words that are most appropriate, right? And I think there is a nature of a future synthetic workforce. That's a reality we're all just going to face, and it's what we're building towards. Why create buzzy concepts that obfuscate what it is? And it does naturally make people uncomfortable because there's that automatic fear of replacement. And I mean, your work, your agency, all these things are being threatened by it, but as an operator, I think of it a little bit differently on the architecture side. The autonomous digital worker may put the human out of the loop in certain components of their job that used to be. But that doesn't, again, we talked about it a little bit before, it does not mean layoffs, right? Redeploying scarce human capacity to innovate, to analyze, to break new ground is where those resources should now be applied. We're basically freeing up our highest value strategic minds in what we have from that manual work, the rote work we've always been doing that we don't even enjoy ourselves anyways. So I think there is that excitement. And if we are always asking those hard questions related to why does something work the way it does or how should it work, the AI can help us go deeper in places we've never gone in our own careers to answer things we haven't or change the scope of our job and our responsibilities. So I think we really do need to design against that idea of autonomous, digital workers that can do parts of our jobs without us. And it should focus on getting us out of that rote work, and automation will be good for us on that side of it. And it's happened before in our lives, and it happens kind of every day in industries that does happen. So I think it will probably flatten and change organizations and how they're layered and structured. And like I said, especially in marketing, I think you're gonna be able to put your arms across and say, well, I've never done that part of the job, but now I can do more of it, and there's really nothing wrong with that. And so there might be greater capacity and more effectiveness out of the people that you have. But I don't think it necessarily is a bad thing to call it a synthetic worker or a autonomous agent or whatever. If we fear that, it's sort of those inevitables, right? And then it becomes an adversarial situation versus embracing it and making the most of it and becoming part of the solution with it.
Let me ask you two different ranges of careers. And because right now we're hearing a lot, and I've experienced it personally, I've experienced with a lot of friends and talking to a lot of recruiters, companies are eliminating the most expensive, most experienced people because they feel they're taking VP roles and they're making head of or director level roles, or they're taking director and they're making them individual contributor roles because AI plus somewhat experienced, but not the most experienced people could even that out and they're saving money. So on the one end, we talked earlier about judgment and experience being that thing that you have more time to do. You could actually spend more time with strategy and planning based on that experience with AI. But if you're getting rid of the people that have the judgment and experience to deliver, so that's one end. So I'll ask you to talk about that. But then the other end is thinking of my son who's going off to college for his freshman year of business school in the fall. What are they going to be able to bring to the table, and what do they need to be relevant in this new workforce? Because both sides are afraid.
They are. They truly are. Actually, let's go with that one first, because I have a son in college too. Our kids that are about entering college are okay because they're almost like that first AI native generation. They're going to figure out the new way of working and come out and have seen it firsthand. So I'm less worried about them. I think it's been a very bumpy road for those that had just graduated from college without AI and didn't build up the experience. So that that's a rough boat to be in. And I think that they're dealing with higher levels of unemployment. They're going to have they're doing a lot more remote work, but they don't have as much mentorship around them. And I look to that generation to be very entrepreneurial, because they're going to have to take a lot of it into their own hands. And that makes me hopeful, but it is a tougher environment than I think you or I came out in. For us, on the other side of the spectrum, where oh wait, do we really need a high-powered executive to make these decisions? This gets back to that sort of modulation where we probably are overcorrecting right now, and we're going to come back to something in between. The value of change management and all of those soft skills do not go away with AI. And people still need to be explained to, like, what are we doing? Where are we going? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? Make me feel good about my contribution to it. So I think from a leadership perspective, it goes once again back to like what makes you a human. I think you really, really need to lean into strong soft skills, strong leadership skills, and emphasize your ability to change groups of people towards goals and objectives aggressively, to stand out from someone who's just very good at their job. Because yes, if all you were the person that just adjudicated that role and that decision, you might be able to push it down a couple layers, save some money, and have somebody with AI that can basically equalize out to that person. So I think you have to look for those pockets of what is really, truly not going to be replaced by AI. And at the end of the day, we're all humans still. And I think for the time being, at minimum, for a long time, I hope, robots are not going to relate to us the same way. We're still not going to let a robot cause us to feel excited about a direction yet. And so I'm pretty hopeful that's what leaders do still in today's world.
One last question regarding within UKG, with what you're working on within your marketing org and how you're trying to operationalize AI. What's your North Star? What's your ultimate goal, where you're like, as a relatively new marketing leader within the last year at UKG, what are you hoping that you'll be able to say you delivered for UKG's platform and ecosystem marketing team?
I could not be more excited, because I think I have fairly strong North Star and clarity around where all this is headed for marketing. But we've generally been a push-based system, of marketing, right? Where we broadcast big messages and send them out to every pocket of the world and hope people react. And now we're going to be in this world where we can make predictions and we can analyze situations for what they are and move towards like a real-time engine that would create value for the customer, right? So the way I talk about it is like hyper relevance at scale, right? At like an infinite scale, right? In a business like UKG, where we serve 50-person company all the way up to the biggest corporations in the entire world, and then we have multiple industries where we have dominant positions, we have to speak people's language. And when you look at all the permutations against how many products we offer, there's quite literally no way you can create that much content and that much messaging for every type of buyer that is out there. And it's part of why I joined, ironically. You think that'd be a reason to run from it, be like, wait, you're joining the team that does messaging and content, and you're like, you're joining something that's almost infinitely impossible to solve for. But AI does allow for this, right? If we were able to trust ourselves and understand that over the future, when we do have these autonomous agents that can create this content, we're going to become coaches of those agents. We're going to be the change management layer of, why are we doing it? Where are we going? How are we evolving? All of those things. But we're not going to, there's no way we can take pen to paper and create all the assets. And I think that in these big tech industries where there's a lot of competition, the next big winners are going to be these ones that can actually hyperscale their content and messaging strategy down to absolute personalization for the buyer on the other end. That's something that in B2B has never really been there, right? They're a little closer in consumer. But even they aren't truly where I think it is. So I think that's really the truly exciting part of what we're going to be seeing here. And there's some big components that we're going to have to build against that to make it happen.
I love that. And I remember 20 years ago, calling it tailored marketing was right message for the right person at the right time. And it's like, we've been trying for that long. And I agree with you. AI absolutely could be the catalyst that finally can make this a reality at scale. It's for companies as large as you, as well as mom and pop shops, because it's going to be maybe democratizing that ability as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say another, thing related to this is that one of the most important things I think I talked a lot about, going back to basics on what digital transformation looks like, understanding how you build a business case, all that. But I will double underscore the importance of building an early, strong, and trusted relationship with your IT partners, right? You're going to have to build a unified data layer of all the sources of data, whether it's your CRM, your marketing automation, and everything in between, and other agents, right? You're going to be orchestrating data sources from all over the place. And so if you bring them in early and start to bring up the topics of governance and security and all those things, you will be in such a better position than trying to just shove it forward from the standpoint of I need. And I think that's going to be a big separator for a marketer, is to learn, again, back to the human skills, how to drive change management, how to relate to other people, how to get people into the same direction, believing in what you believe needs to be done for the business.
That's perfect. And I think it's a great way to end it. Great advice. And this was a terrific conversation, John. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you very much, Rob. I've loved being here. Thank you.